In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, we introduce you to the essential business management skills that we project managers need in order to become more strategic. Hello and welcome to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is episode 418 and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. It's good to have you with us. Last year at the PMI Global Conference in Chicago, I recorded about a dozen interviews. They have all been published over the past few months, and you've probably heard some or all of them. But what you don't know is what happened once each interview was complete, because I pressed the recording button one more time and asked each of my guests the following question. What business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations? And today you are going to get all the answers that I've recorded in one nice mashup. We begin with Andy Kaufmann, who says that assertiveness is one of the keys to success. Andy, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
You know, I had a coaching client who he was a director level at the time, and he said to me, he goes, all right, so this is like summer, mid-year. By next spring, I need to be a vice president. And it surprised me that he was so focused on title. Because most people are, maybe it's more on pay or something else, but he goes, I got to have that title by then. And so we talked about it, that you can't go in entitled, but you can sometimes ask, for example, I want to get there. What does it take to get there? And then you have to do it. You can't just, say it. And by the way, he got it. And it wasn't brilliance coaching. It was that he did the stuff that he had to do. And one of the things I find, especially for project managers who grow up from individual contributor to maybe some sort of team leader to some sort of project manager or whatever, as they grow up, one of the business management skills that's missing is assertiveness. Is as they get more and more responsibility, sometimes they become a little bit more unsure of themselves. Like I read this thing that said the biggest fear of CEOs is the imposter syndrome, that people will find out that we're not as good as what we think, And so as they get more and more, sometimes they start pulling back on the assertiveness. And if anybody, would like some advice on that, there's this woman named Sarah Robb O'Hagan who wrote a book called Extreme You. And she is like, here are some ways to ramp up your assertiveness. And too often we think sometimes assertiveness is aggressiveness. And it's different. It's sometimes being willing to speak up, saying, I want to be on those strategic programs. What does it take to do that? Or speaking up in a meeting. One of the proxies we use for someone's leadership skills is, do they speak up in meetings? It's a pretty weak proxy, but we use that sometimes. They don't speak up in meetings. They're probably not a leader, which is weak. But sometimes that's a shortcut that we use. So a little bit more speaking up, a little bit more of asking for what you want and advocating for yourself. And there are a lot of great resources to do it, but it's one that I find a lot of project managers don't do.
And now that you have a new title and you have risen in the ranks, I think that you'll need a big dose of leadership. So here are Betsy Stockdale and Laszlo Retfalvi. So Betsy, what business management skills are essential for today's project manager if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
For me, that's leadership. It's really being able to go through, help identify and understand, especially where we need to go and the best ways to get there. And using maybe some of our skills in terms of influence to help identify or to help people understand the variety of different ways that we can get there and accomplish the same goal.
So Laszlo, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
That's a very good question. I've done a lot of research over the last 20, 30 years, including applying practical principles, reviewing PMI's triangle, and I came up with something that is known as a project management leadership model. And it consists of 4 items, 4 components. Your ability to have project management expertise. These are the things that distinguish you as a project manager. You have core leadership skills. This is where you augment management with leadership. You have what we refer to as a risk-smart attitude. We talked about this a fair amount in today's session. And then the last one is accountability-based behavior. And this is very important because it's not about being responsible, it's about being accountable. Combine those and make sure that you're continually improving those elements is what, in my opinion, sets you apart from a project manager to an outstanding project manager, and then you're linked in exactly where you need to be from a strategic perspective, and you'll just be a high-end performer.
All right, so I asked a total of 10 interview guests to name the business management skill that we project managers need. Of course, we were bound to have a few duplicates, but like you've just heard, even though Betsy and Laszlo both said leadership, they each had their own twist. And it's the same with the next skill. 3 of our guests have chosen flexibility, but from their own point of view. Here are Justin Fraser, Jen Pfaff, and Sarah Gallagher with their thoughts on being flexible. So, Justin, what business management skills are essential for today's project manager if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
Today's project manager has to be flexible and adaptable to the world that's changing around us. We have new technology, we have apps that help in productivity, we have new ways of doing business, and to stay flexible with new ideas is going to allow you to do your projects well and move forward into the strategic thinking for your organization.
Jen, what business management skills are essential for today's project manager if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organization?
I think and I'm just going to use one, so hopefully this one is broad enough that it can be applied in the way that you're looking for. I think being able to think flexibly and act flexibly. And what I mean by that is I think if you have project managers, I think there's only one way to do things or one way to apply things. It can impact the project and it can impact the team. So if you can realize that people are coming into projects with a lot of different subject matter expertise and they're also bringing a lot of different opinions, if you as the program manager or project manager can be flexible in that, open-minded, willing to try new things, willing to perhaps see things from a different perspective, if you will, that flexibility will allow you to think strategically, be open to seeing things. And that, I think, going forward is something that can really carry you a long ways.
Sarah, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organization?
I think the most important skill, and maybe it's more a practice than a skill, is flexibility. I think as PMs, we don't have always the best reputation for being flexible, right? We love our process and our best practices, and don't get me wrong, I love those things too. But the thing to remember is that before something was best practice, it was somebody's harebrained idea, right? And so for me, I think we've got to be open to those harebrained ideas from time to time. If something isn't working, or if the number of processes we have is overburdensome to the culture that we're working in, or the objective that we're trying to achieve, or the time that we have, do something different. Don't get that reputation for being rigid and entrenched, and people will trust you with their strategic plan.
Well, because 3 of my guests have chosen flexibility, this means that flexibility is the informal winner of our informal survey here. But we have 4 more to go. Next, we have Kim Wasson, who focuses on communication as an essential business management skill. Kim, please tell me, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
This is such an interesting question. I think near the top of the list has got to be communication. You have to be able to communicate confidently, and that's not just in presentations. You have to be clear in your written communications. You have to be clear in your verbal communications. Because if you're working on strategic projects, you're going to be working with people who are time constrained, and you need to be able to get the information to them the most efficient way possible in which they will understand what it is you want them to understand. Another, and we kind of touched on this when we talked earlier, I don't know if it's a business skill, but I think you have to be very brave to be on strategic projects. I think you have to ask for them. You have to let your management know you want them, and you have to be willing. You're going to take some stones. You're going to be in a spotlight. The rewards are huge. It's a lot of fun, but you can't be afraid to be out there in front of people, and you can't be afraid to say, okay, that was wrong, but here's how I fixed it. And that's kind of the third thing is you have to be able to recover. And you have to be able to recover quickly if you're doing a strategic project. Things will go wrong. Things go wrong in every project. Otherwise, they wouldn't need us, right? But as things go wrong, you need to respond to them appropriately. You need to marshal your team. You need to do the right contingency planning up front. You need to execute your contingency plans afterwards. And you need to respond not from a place of panic, but moving forward swiftly in a concerted effort to deal with the problem. And the communication ties right into that because you have to be able to communicate what you're doing and keep everybody calm. So I think those are my big three. If you're going to work on the big projects, you got to be out there, you got to be in charge, you got to be listening to people, and you have to be communicating it.
Okay, so communication is definitely important. We project managers already know that because it covers about 90% of what we do in projects. But it's good to hear that it's also a business management skill. But what about people management? Remember, I always say that PM not only stands for project management, but also, and maybe more importantly, it stands for people management. Here is Darryl Hahn. Darryl, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
I'd have to say probably in my organization, it's people management and specifically how to handle difficult people, because you're always going to get folks that don't want to play well with others. And when you're running an annual plan or you're running a project management office or any of these sorts of high-level functions for your organization, you're always going to have a lot of different people with their own agendas, and people try and manage them differently. Some people are full of intimidation, some people are, for lack of a better phrase, bribery, and, however you guys work through those. But it's really the skill set of managing people, not just people that report to you, but people in general, I have found is super helpful in my organization.
Several of the suggestions so far have been pretty tactical. Be flexible, communicate well, manage your people well. But now we leave the tactical and we move into the strategic. Here is what Jeff Kissinger says about why understanding the strategy and vision is an important business management skill for us. Jeff, what business management skills are necessary for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects in their organization?
They need to understand vision. They have to have that down, and it has to be a very clear vision that everybody involved with it has to agree to. If it's clarified and it's agreed to, you're going to make it a lot easier on everybody involved to connect to it and to do what they do well to make it happen.
And last but not least, here is Niraj Kumar and why he thinks that being strategic is the way to go. Niraj, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations?
Great question. Thank you, Cornelius. When I think about strategic projects, what I think the project managers need to have are two critical skills, and they go together, but I'll explain them. The first one is project managers need to think and act and believe like the strategy creators do in their organization. Some of the project managers fail to work and manage strategic projects because they are in their own world. They're thinking from their perspective, their context. They're not thinking in terms of their senior stakeholders, their customers. You have to get into your customer's head. Think about how they were thinking. For example, if you're going to, let's say the strategic project is, we are sitting in downtown Chicago. Let's say the strategic project is to design the futuristic buildings in this area of downtown, right? Let's say that's the project. Now, our stakeholders who are giving us these projects, who are creating these projects, they're thinking about things that are very futuristic. They're thinking about stuff like, how will the population look like in 5 years? How will the demographic makeup will be in 5 years, right? Stuff like that. They are thinking in a different place than project managers. Project managers generally don't like to go there. They like to think about, okay, tell me the project, and I want to create a schedule. That's not enough. So the most important skill here is start thinking about how your strategy creators, people who hand out strategic projects, think. That will get you ahead of all other project managers, because generally PMs don't go there. You want to go there in your mind. If you can't do that, go ask them questions. Just go get with one of your stakeholders like that who think about creating strategy. So that's one skill, very important. Get in their head. The second that's related is learn how to tie the strategy to the tasks that you will be doing. Now, the second one is not as difficult, I would say, because it requires cognitive skills and a lot of experience. But you will find out that the project managers who are very senior in their professional life and they have done strategic projects, executed strategic projects very well, they know how to connect. They know how to connect the strategy with their audience members. For example, let's go back to the example of the designing a futuristic housing situation in downtown here with high-rise buildings. You want to be able to know your stakeholders and tie that strategy to what they need. For example, futuristic buildings might mean that they're connected by Internet of Things. When you're talking to your programmer team members, that's what you want to tell them, because that's connected to these people's motivation. You're connecting their tactical work to the strategic objective. So that's one example that I would think about. So in summation, what I would suggest is the two skills that they need to have, and they are related. This is the first place to start, is people related. You find out, get into the head of your strategy creators. Think like they think. Think like, what are their dreams? What are their pains? Instead of putting your own ideas, think about their ideas. What are they thinking in terms of 5 years after today? Chicago downtown has 5 colors. Like, let's say, it seems so funny to me, but you'll be surprised if there are famous artists on the strategy creators board. That's what they're thinking, right? They might be thinking, I want the building to have all 7 colors, like in a span of 1 mile. And a project manager like me who has a technical background, I'd be like, oh my God, that's just totally useless to me. But to my customer, that matters. Since it matters to her, I need to respect it and I need to work with it. That's the first skill. The second skill is, once you have an idea of the scope, you relate it to people who are thinking in their tactical world. If you can do those two things, you'll be ahead of so many project managers and you will have a great career. And some strategic projects take longer than tactical projects. That also means you have a longer career. You might have a project that runs for 5 years. That gives you stability. That gives you a way to get your name out there. So that's what I would recommend. Thank you. Great question.
There you have it. 10 thinkers and leaders with their answers to the question, what business management skills are essential for today's project managers if they want to become more and more involved in strategic projects for their organizations? And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Please visit pm-podcast.com for show notes, links, transcripts, and PDU information. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this quote from Vidal Sassoon. The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. Until next time.